You see him on the news.
CNN.com contributor, Dean Obeidallah. So, Dean...
Watch him at comedy clubs.
When I say Mecca, do you think of a holy place or an urban clothing line?
Read his articles. And you hear him on the radio. The Dean Obeidallah Show is on live right here on SiriusXM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters of the resistance. Friday, November 30th. We're live right here, the last day of November. And I think we are getting close to Donald Trump being visited by the ghost of prison future. It just seems every day we're getting close. He was freaking out again today. At this point, the question is not who connected to Donald Trump as a criminal. The question is anyone connected to Donald Trump who's not a criminal? This is unreal. This is truly a crime family. I can only imagine if we were ever allowed into Mueller's office, it would look like a mob flowchart with the mafia old-time things. And on the top would be the capo de tutte capo, Donald Trump. And down his capos all over, his other captains. Being half Sicilian, this brings me joy on some level talking about this. And you'd have all these lieutenants. And it all leads, though, for them going for the guy at the top. And we're almost there. And last night, the late night comics did a great job. I'll just play two clips because it's not just funny. They are informing an audience who might be too busy to follow the nuance of Michael Cohen's testimony and what he said yesterday. And I'm glad the late night comics are informing people, especially a lot of younger people who might not be following what's going on. So first, let's hear Stephen Colbert's take from last night.
Here's the lie that Cohen told. Cohen told congressional committees that the Moscow Trump Tower project ended in January of 2016 when it actually had continued until June of 2016, right before the conventions. Why would Cohen lie about that? Well, he didn't want people to think Trump was in bed with the Russians, because nobody wants to be in that Russian bed. Now, the president, it's got pee-pee in it. The president... I didn't realize I was being subtle. And the president addressed Cohen's guilty plea in today's episode of America's favorite I Can't Hear You talk show, Chopper Talk.
What he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about. Very simply, Michael Cohen is lying.
And it's terrible because this time I'm not paying him to lie, okay? He's lying pro bono. Before, I was paying him to say I never boned all those pros.
So, and then Trevor Noah did a really good job going through Trump's comments right there again when he was boarding Air Force One or the helicopter yesterday to take the Air Force One, and just calling out Trump's lies in this response here to the reports. Let's hear clip number 2, please.
So while candidate Trump was running for president, he was simultaneously trying to make a deal for a new project in Moscow, right? And that sounds like a clear conflict of interest, but if you think it's that simple, you just haven't heard President Trump's explanation.
I didn't do the project. I decided not to do the project, so I didn't do it. So we're not talking about doing a project. We're talking about not doing a project. Everybody knew about it. It was written about in newspapers. Now, here's the thing. Even if he was right, it doesn't matter, because I was allowed to do whatever I wanted during the campaign.
Yeah, I didn't do the thing, but if I did the thing, then the thing is, but I didn't do the thing, and I just, please don't hit me, mommy. Please don't hit me, mommy. So according to the president, Cohen is lying and also not lying. Somehow it's both. Yeah. And you know, Trump is the only person whose explanations include every possible outcome, right? Yeah, it's like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books. He's like, if I didn't do it, go to page 3. But if I did, it was totally okay, go to page 5. And if you want to hear about my massive electoral college victory, turn to any page, folks, and I'll tell you about it.
So let's go through a little why this all matters and what we learned today. Because there was some new news today, and I think Donald Trump Jr., if he didn't have a lawyer, I'm being objective as a lawyer myself, he better get himself a criminal defense attorney. There's no doubt. I mean, he needs to have one. I think he's had one before, but he should be huddling up with them perhaps this weekend. But let's go through a little of not just yesterday what we learned, because we went through that a lot, but I went back today and looked at some of the other past things, and you put these all together like on a timeline chart, and it's remarkable how things are lining up. And again, Robert Mueller's got all of this. He's way ahead of me or any of us doing this because he has access to information before we do. what we learned definitively, there's no dispute. It was actually in the news before this, but it came up again yesterday. October 13th, 2015, a letter of intent was signed by a Russian investor named Andrei Rozov to build the Trump Tower in Moscow with Donald Trump. That was sent to Michael Cohen, and it was dated October 13, 2015. And in this letter, the cover letter for the letter of intent, it was forwarded by a man named Felix Sater, S-A-T-E-R. If I'm mispronouncing it, you've seen it in print, Felix Sater. And what's interesting in this cover letter, it says one thing you would expect, but something you would not expect at all. And now there's no dispute this cover letter and this letter of intent was revealed last year, but now I went back and looked at the reporting there, and with fresh eyes, knowing what we know now, all of a sudden things look a little different. In the cover letter that Felix sent to Michael Cohen, said, let's make this happen and build a Trump Moscow. That makes sense. Then he adds, and possibly fix relations between the countries by showing everyone that commerce and business are much better and more practical than politics. That should be Putin's message as well, and we will help him agree on that message. Help world peace and make a lot of money. Now, you might say, who's Felix Sater? That's a good question. Let me fill you in and remind people, some know and some don't know. He's a lesser player up until now. I think all of a sudden he's going to become much more important in all of this. He's an interesting guy. He is a Russian-born businessman who was raised mostly in Brooklyn. He was doing business with the Trump organization for about a decade. But Donald Trump consistently denied knowing who this man is. Even as late as 2015, when asked about Felix Sater, Trump said, hemmed and hawed, and said, boy, I have to even think about it. And it's weird that he's pretending in even 2015 not to know this guy. And now, let me give you a little bit more about Felix Sater. His past record includes a conviction for lacerating a man's face with a broken margarita glass in a bar brawl. He was also involved in a multi-million-dollar stock fraud and money laundering scheme. Despite that record, literally a criminal record, and violent record, he worked for nearly 10 years with the Trump organization in search of deals in Russia and other places in the former Soviet Republic. Here's what's really interesting. This already had been reported in the past, but now it seems more interesting learning what we did yesterday, that there was, from October 2015 to June of 2016, active negotiations to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. That was new yesterday. Everyone was told it had ended in January. Well, no, it didn't. In 2015, Felix Sater wrote a series of emails to Michael Cohen in which he and these are completely, this is not sources, these are all undisputed emails. He wrote in these emails back in 2015, our boy, referring to Trump, can become president of the USA and we can engineer it. And then he adds, I will get all of Putin teams to buy in on this. I will manage this process. And the emails show from the earliest times of Trump's campaign that Felix Sater was bragging about getting Putin involved to help him, and that close ties with the Trump campaign between the Kremlin and Trump would help Donald Trump win this election. So on its own, that could be a nice, interesting thing. But when you know that they were actually negotiating for a business deal, and then you add to it the fact that the Russian military was attacking DNC, Hillary Clinton, and using a cyber warfare of lies on social media, all of a sudden things look slightly different. What else did we learn yesterday? We learned that Cohen, in his negotiations to get this Russian Trump Tower building built, talked to not just business people, like the guy he signed the letter of intent with, but up at the highest levels of the Russian government were involved, including Vladimir Putin's press secretary was actually involved in all of this. And then last night during the show, we learned something, was breaking news, that Michael Cohen's business associate, Felix Sater, it all comes back to Felix Sater, told BuzzFeed News that he and Cohen had planned to give Putin a $50 million penthouse in Trump Tower, Moscow. He said the reason they were going to do that was to lure other Russian oligarchs to the project. But that's a really big present, isn't it? I mean, I get Russia's not America. You do business differently, and I guess maybe you have to give bribes to certain people. And we're going to get to, in fact, why that's a crime in a second. But $50 million is not like, that's a huge bribe. That is a tremendous bribe. That is more than, here's a bribe to help me get approvals to build a building. That's like a bribe. Like, here's $50 million on down payment. You help me win the presidency through anything you have to do. And there's more where that money came from. Because again, going back to the first letter, Felix Sater from the beginning, saying with the letter of intent, his cover letter saying that the message should be commerce and business are much better and more practical than politics. Let's help make world peace and make a lot of money together. It was all about making money on some level, but Trump needed to win the White House to deliver on that. And that's at least my sense of what's going on. So where's the crime, you ask, in this business dealing? Well, we have a thing called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which makes it a federal crime for U.S. citizens and businesses to bribe foreign officials. Let me repeat that. It's called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It's a felony. It's a federal law. U.S. citizens offering a bribe to government officials in other nations, like this one is reported, to give Putin a $50 million penthouse would be a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Here is a former federal prosecutor today, Joyce Vance on MSNBC, discussing this law and also discussing that you could be charged with a crime for attempting to do this, even if it was not completely effectuated. So let's hear clip number 4.
Do you see anything here touching illegality?
There's a lot of potential illegality here. Probably the biggest chunk would be if there's an issue with this story that we heard last night, that there had been a promise of a $50 million penthouse to Putin if the Trump-Moscow project went forward. But there are a lot of ifs surrounding that, Stephanie. For prosecutors, the devil is always in the details. There's a law in this country, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, that makes it illegal to pay a bribe to someone in a foreign country to facilitate your business dealings.
But since the deal never happened, since there is no Trump Tower Moscow, will that constitute anything?
Sure, and that's the kind of questions that prosecutors walk through, because it can also be illegal to enter into a conspiracy to do something that you don't actually do. It can even be illegal to make an attempt in certain circumstances, and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act has a provision like that.
So she makes it very clear that's a former federal prosecutor. You don't have to rely on me. I was never a prosecutor, and I was a municipal court prosecutor. If you had a DWI question, I can answer that in a second, but big things like that, no. So I'll defer to her, and the reality is, depends on the fact pattern, it could be a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Not 100% clear, but it could be. So before we get to the new facts today about Donald Trump Jr., and it's funny, there was a conservative on hold who's saying, where's the crime? And I just went through the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and he hung up because he knows the reality. And look, this is a criminal enterprise. This is not an administration. This is not a regime, as I've called it. This is a criminal enterprise that is running this White House. And I say that completely not hyperbolically at all. We're going to go through even more here. This is a crime family. So what we know now, definitively, no dispute, from October 2015 to June 2016, Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and the Trump family are dealing with the Russians at the highest levels of government to try to get approval to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. That's what we know. That was not disclosed to the American public. Nobody knew that. If there's a crime or not, put that aside. This is the heart of the campaign. And what happens during the campaign? There's a lot of talk of Putin. Here's a clip from November 2015 from the Republican debate where Donald Trump is sucking up to Putin, defending Putin. And we have some of the other candidates pushing back on that. So let's hear clip number 7.
As far as Syria, I like if Putin wants to go in, and I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes. We were stablemates, and we did very well that night. But you know that. But if Putin wants to go and knock the hell out of ISIS, I am all for it 100%, and I can't understand how anybody would be against it. They blew up, hold it, they blew up, wait a minute, they blew up a Russian airplane. He cannot be in love with these people. He's going in, and we can go in, and everybody should go in.
Donald is wrong on this. He is absolutely wrong on this. We're not going to be the world's policeman, but we sure as heck better be the world's leader. There's a huge difference where without us leading, voids are filled. And the idea that it's a good idea for Putin to be in Syria, let ISIS take out Assad, and then Putin will take out ISIS. I mean, that's like a board game. That's like playing Monopoly or something. That's not how the real world works.
Mr. Trump ought to know that we should not speak to people from a position of weakness.
And she goes on to say, that's Putin. We don't speak to Putin. That's November 2015. That's the GOP presidential debate. At that very time, Donald Trump already has a letter of intent with the Russians from the month before, and meaning there was negotiations before that. Donald Trump did not reveal that to anybody because the Republican candidates running against him would have brought that up. They would have said, you love Putin. You keep saying nice things about Putin. You're doing business with him. That's why you're saying this. You stand to make millions of dollars with Putin. That's why you're defending him. Add to that, during this whole time this is being negotiated, and America doesn't know it. We have no clue about this. March 2016, Trump is almost the presumptive GOP nominee. He is leading. He's running away with it. He is talking actively about giving Vladimir Putin what he wants. Openly talked about an interview with the New York Times, reducing American sanctions on the Ukraine, on Russia for their annexation of Crimea. We didn't know he had a business deal, that he was literally negotiating a business deal. That's his March 2016. He is negotiating a business deal with Russia while advocating less sanctions on Russia. We didn't know that. If anyone knew, they go, this is why you're doing this, because you stand to make millions with the Russians. You actually have a letter of intent. And Michael Cohen, your personal attorney, is speaking at the highest levels of the Russian government to help, which made Putin happy. No, 2016, Donald Trump don't know a thing because Donald Trump and all Trump's people are lying for him. In fact, here is Trump even in 2016 and 2017 lying a whole bunch of cuts together. Here's clip number 3.
I mean, I have nothing to do with Russia. I don't have any jobs in Russia. I'm all over the world, but we're not involved in Russia. I have no relationship to Russia. I don't deal there. I have no businesses there. I have no loans from Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia, folks, okay? I don't have any deals in Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia. I have no investments in Russia. None whatsoever. I have no dealings with Russia. I have no deals in Russia. I have no deals that could happen in Russia because we've stayed away. What do I know about the Russians? What do I know about the Russians? Then they said, he borrows money from I don't borrow money from the Russians. I promise you, I don't have any deals with Russia.
So there's Donald Trump. On to the letter, is he being correct? Perhaps on some level. If this is the only deal, we don't know about any other. Is he being honest with the American people? No. Because he knew he had a letter of intent, that he had tried to make a deal with Russia. He was trying, and it ended in June 2016. But there was negotiations going on, and he's lying to the American people. What else did we learn today? This is actually significant, because when you look at the scope of how far the Trump crime family is potentially criminally liable, we learned that Donald Trump Jr. may have committed perjury. He may have lied in violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 1001 under oath to the Senate. And what do I mean by that? Very clear. And this is not a doubt. This is not source reporting. This has already been released. What we know now from Michael Cohen is that they were negotiating with Russia from October to June 2016. That's the testimony of Michael Cohen yesterday under oath when he's pleading guilty and in the pleadings that Robert Mueller has. What did Don Jr. in September 2017 tell the Senate about the negotiations? He told them it concluded without result at the end of what year? 2014. And then he was asked, I'll read the transcript, but not in 2015 or 2016. Donald Trump Jr. responds, certainly not 2016. Certainly not 2016. Michael Cohen yesterday testified he was negotiating till June of 2016 with the Russians. And that's in Robert Mueller's pleading documents. And in the pleading documents yesterday, Robert Mueller submitted to the court, it says Michael Cohen briefed family members, including Don Jr. and Ivanka on this. So you got a question. Somebody's lying. Right? I cannot tell you because Michael Cohen said it under oath yesterday. It's the truth. I can tell you Michael Cohen is saying, I negotiated through June 2016 and I copied Don Jr. on emails and I briefed the family. Don Jr. testified under oath, certainly not 2016. Nothing going on. Because they're all doing the party line. So the question is, how do you determine who's telling the truth? Well, you can assess their credibility. They both testify. You look at them and you go, I believe this person over the other. That's fine. Or you can have independent evidence, objective evidence that might support one or the other. Well, I think we have that. According to the Wall Street Journal today, investigators obtained emails about the project in which Michael Cohen communicated with or copied Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr. In one instance, Ivanka actually recommended an architect for the building and played a key role in designing an on-site spa, which was going to be named the Ivanka Trump Spa. Ladies and gentlemen, it's little by little these things fill in, and it's remarkable to watch this. I was not an adult or cognitive of what was going on at the time of Watergate. I was alive but didn't know it. I feel like we are watching what happened in Watergate. So what we know now, assuming Michael Cohen testimony is correct, and they have Robert Mueller's got the emails. Don't forget, Robert Mueller spoke to Michael Cohen for hours and hours and hours. So I believe Robert Mueller would have never put Michael Cohen out there if he did not believe this story and didn't have evidence. So I think we can side on, you're weighing the evidence, you can side with Michael Cohen here. That would mean October 2015 till June 2016, they're negotiating in earnest with Russia, with the highest levels of government, to make a deal. At the very same time, Donald Trump is not revealing that. He is defending Putin at debates. He is advocating getting rid of sanctions on Putin. And at the very time that's all going on, the Russian military is hacking the DNC and Hillary Clinton's emails and giving it to WikiLeaks, and they weaponize it to defeat Hillary Clinton. If this was a movie, you'd be like, get out of here. This is real life. So here are my questions for you. You're my guest at the top of the hour, but why did Donald Trump Jr. lie? Why did Michael Cohen lie? Why is everyone on Team Trump lying to conceal the dealings with Russia that went on till June 2016? Is it one, just bad optics? Just that simple. They said it's going to look bad. We were dealing with Russia. You were running for president. You don't tell anyone. Or two, is it really involved in a criminal conspiracy? They were all in cahoots here. Or three, anything else. I'm open to any idea. There's no idea too outlandish when you're brainstorming, because often people call in and think of ideas that the pundits who have blinders on and think certain ways, and then you tell me and I'm like, oh yeah. So I'd love to hear from you. 866-997-4748, 866-997-4748. And I don't take joy in Don Jr. potentially being indicted. His father probably pardoned him. But if you commit a crime, that's the way it has to go. I sincerely don't take any joy in Don Jr. The father's the one who's the crime boss. He's the one that should pay the price for everything. But all right, 866-997-4748. Be right back after this break.
Progressive values are the best of American values, and we need to keep fighting for them to save our country.
Don't go anywhere. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.